Let's bring political analyst Thobani Zikalala to weigh in on the voter registration weekend drive. Thobani, good afternoon and thanks for your time with us here on the SABC at this hour.
Good morning, Lizelle, and good morning to your SABC News viewers.
Thobani, let's get your observations. It's the final push ahead of the end of the second voter registration weekend, obviously with online still remaining an option. But what have been your observations?
I think the voter registration has gone very well. It seems that South Africa has taken very seriously these 2024 elections, which of course comes after 30 years of our democracy. I think for me, I've observed that, and maybe I've been pleased by, of course, what IEC is telling us, that we have reached unprecedented numbers that we have not had before, and we've reached maybe above 27 million, which I think bodes well for the strength of our democracy. But of course, I'm still a bit disappointed with the rate at which young people in particular are registering for the elections. I mean, it bodes as well with, of course, that the numbers are rising, but when you have what we could call the future of this country not really engaging themselves with the process of being active citizens, which begins, I think, of course, with the idea of registering to vote and making sure that on election day, when it has been announced, you make sure that you are there to cast your vote, to make sure that this democracy is strengthened and make sure that the majority of the people are participating. I mean, in the past, we've had about 26 million people in South Africa registered, but we've always had maybe around 18 to 20 million people going to vote. And I think, for me, the biggest test will be, out of the many people that are going to vote register now, how many of them are we going to have on registration day? Because I think on voting day, because I think that will be very important. As South Africa goes to the ballot, it's going to be very important for the people of South Africa to go and participate and be able to elect their own leaders. And of course, it doesn't stop there with just voting. Vote also means that you must also be a participating citizen who then will participate also in the holding accountable and making sure that this democracy of ours works.
No, absolutely. And you raise a valid point, because I actually wanted to look at some of your concerns at this point, given voter apathy, given the level of voter education as well, the conscientizing that's also coming through this time round.
I think of course we can always do better. I think we've tried. I think there's lacked really on voter education and political education of the citizens of South Africa, because there's always this voter apathy that rises every election. But I think somewhat it is not just voter apathy for itself. It's voter apathy that is based on the fact that other people of South Africa maybe do not really understand how this democracy works and why it is important for one to participate. I mean, there are many people with many views. Some believe that voting does not change a thing, but if every election we are able to go and vote and we are able to elect a government, so surely there is something that voting can do as a starting point to make sure that our democracy works. Of course, the IEC could do better in its voter education and civic education to make sure that the consciousness of the voter in South Africa rises. We must applaud also those organizations who have made sure that where the IEC is unable to do some of its work, they are able to come in and bolster it. And also to make sure that there is a rise in terms of people who are able to participate to vote. I mean, that always is good for any democracy, when as much as possible people of a country are able to participate. I mean, South Africa is one of the countries where it is almost free in terms of voting, in terms of the idea that you are not going to be ostracized. There are no people who are going to be denied the right to go to vote. So we must make sure that we always affirm that vote and we always participate.
Yes, because Thobani, obviously the policies implemented by those who are elected will impact the social, the economic fabric of our nation going forward. And so when we look at the number of opposition parties as well, and the independent candidates this time round, the length of the ballot paper, just in relation to what you've echoed, what do you also want? How would you also want to weigh in on that front?
I think for me, it's not bad for our democracy when opposition parties emerge, when there's a lot of political parties. But my biggest concern has always been, with the emergence of new political parties, what is the idea of creating real political alternatives? I mean, in this country, we seem to be very invested of creating options and political options in the ballot, but not real political alternatives that seek to suggest that these new parties are shifting away from the norm and introducing new ways of doing politics, of organizing society and the likes. It seems we may as well have a lot of rehashing of ideas that already exist in the political system.
Yes.
Of course, we must see a different political culture when these oppositions emerge. I have a concern with the length of the ballot paper, and I think we've complicated the system very much when we have individual votes, individual ballot candidates, and so many political parties. There must be a need for many of these political parties to really consider what we have called political consolidation. I mean, many of them have got ideas or lines of convergence where their ideas seem to be similar. There must be something that the political leaders in the country are able to do to make sure that they consolidate their political effort so that we don't have this idea of a multiplicity of political parties. They are almost just maybe speaking the same language, because that also it sometimes makes this democracy to be weak, because we need real strong organizations who are going to be able to alter the political culture and alter the political organization of the society.
Yes, which shines a spotlight on the fragmentation of the opposition and its efficacy going forward, just in challenging the ruling party. And so thank you for also speaking to that, because you also now touched on the point of ideas. And looking at the demographics, looking at those who have turned up to date to register, there are some concerns about new and first-time voters and the way in which, those who have put themselves forth to be elected are interacting and connecting with them. And given that they are the future labor force of the country, they might not have the emotional connection that those who were alive during the initial transition of our democracy 30 years ago. I mean, these are some of the dynamics that are going to play a role this time round. And where do you think, how do you think they're faring on that front as well? Just given the numbers reflected thus far.
I think for me, the concern when it relates to the first-time voter, the so-called born free and Generation Z and the millennials and whatnot, the big thing is that political parties in the country seem to have always relied on the idea of the nostalgic, emotional voter who votes on the basis of having lived through apartheid and the hard times. And maybe that voter may not have this emotional attachment to the voting process, which means the political worker and the political activist who's organizing political parties must be able to fashion a culture, a language that seeks to speak to someone who's living in South Africa today. Of course, without negating the history of this country and how we got here and how this country got to be organized in the way that it's organized. But there should be a different type of language. And I don't think that the political parties today have been able to really speak to the young voter, especially the voter who has never lived through apartheid, the voter who has never maybe lived through the bad times that this country lived through, which is not to say that there are no bad times anymore and when apartheid has not affected how these young people live today, but to say that they may not have any lived reality or lived experience of where we come from, which means how we talk to them about voting may be slightly different to someone who's 60 years old. So we need to have a much more vigor and energy to create a political culture, a political language that speaks directly to the voter that's going to vote. That's